I'm Thomas Little. Likewise, to those of you who I have not yet met, it's a pleasure to meet you now. And to those I have met and love, you know that I've met you and love you.
I'm Coleman Stevenson. I am incredibly honored to have worked with these two wonderful people in this extraordinary adventure that we have had over the last year plus developing this concept and this work, and I'm very grateful to all of you for being here.
Yes.
Fantastic. So I am a member of Amos Eno Gallery, which is a nonprofit artist cooperative. And in this show, I invited Coleman Stevenson to come participate with me and have a dialogue. And then she suggested that we invite Thomas, and it immediately became a really, really fecund, exciting, inspiring trio conversation over the last 14 months, I think. I really don't know exactly when we started. It wasn't the chimera until very, very recently, toward the end of the work. But all of us had really, really powerful ideas about wanting to create an ecosystem where we can explore ideas such as collaboration, but also communication in a really, really big way. Communication that crossed over species boundaries, communication that crossed in and out of meaningful, recognizable language, and then really embracing things that were either nonsensical or asemic, meaningless, magical, surprising, and letting each of our own processes inform the way that we were creating work. So a lot of the artwork in the show is really indicative of a lot of the processes and styles and methodologies that we generally employ in our studio practices, but all of it was sort of fusing together thematically, content-wise, as we were making the work in preparation for this exhibition. We met once a month on Zoom for up to 4.5 hours, which if it sounds like torture would normally be the case, but we were just so enthusiastic, and usually around like 2:30 I'd be like, I have to go do something, please stop inspiring me. And it'd be really fun, and it had to be Zoom, not just because of the pandemic, but because Coleman is joining us from Portland, Oregon, Thomas is here from rural North Carolina, and I live in Vermont. So we never actually physically met until Monday of this week.
Wow.
And the work didn't sing together and be in conversation together until Monday of this week. So if you look around and see the way that confluence and dialogue is happening, just know that like it transcends time and space, man. So we wanted to have this artist talk because there's a lot of really complex things happening on these works on paper and paper-like. And we wanted to give people an opportunity to ask us questions. So this really isn't meant to be a very formal talk. We really want to just have a dialogue and continue to extend that dialogue outside of this like more intimate trio. So 2 questions that I'll just sort of launch to start off the conversation, and then please popcorn as it makes sense. The first one is, Thomas, please tell us about your very, very strange and wonderful collaborator.
Okay, I will. Because there is always a 4th, maybe even 5th or 6th or infinite collaborator that's working with us. And this one is very old, a billion-year-old giant amoeba that is one of the agents of soil formation on Earth. It's literally older than dirt. It's a very old organism, Physarum polycephalum. It is an acellular slime mold, and it is a beautiful yellow color, as you can tell. I'm fond of yellow. And it is my collaborator. It is a organism that has been used in many laboratory settings to, some of you might know, it's kind of, it's a pop science fun thing. People might say, oh, this thing knows how to solve a maze. And it does make these beautiful like maze solving things. It's a little bit like a living algorithm. And of course it does that without having any sort of organs whatsoever. It's all just endoplasm and ectoplasm, protoplasm, cytoplasm, various plasms. And so yeah, no organs, and it does this like this most interesting way of just like having honed this mechanism of like living in this world for millions of years, and being this incredible thing. It's like, you know, it's also, it's biologically immortal. It doesn't have senescence, which is to say it's not programmed to age or die. So it just changes its, you know, form. It changes back into a spore, or it'll change into a dry little scabby flake, or it'll be like a cell that has a flagella when it's swimming in fresh water. It's truly a protean organism that's constantly changing, and it's very, so cool. I love it. And I use it in my work. So I also, I'm going to talk about a collaborator.
Go for it.
Okay, so I feed it oatmeal. It loves oatmeal. Oatmeal is its favoriteest thing in the world, and I love that.
Not instant oatmeal.
Not instant oatmeal. And maybe steel patch. We don't know. We were baffled by how many oatmeals were really available when we came. We're like, oh my gosh, look at all these oatmeals. What would I like? So yeah, I feed it oatmeal with the pigments, which I will talk about too. The pigments are pretty cool. And it then deposits these little lines on the work. And it does that because it's eating the oatmeal and it's moving. At the same time, while it's eating, because it's a collective group of amoeba that's like got all this finding stuff around. It's sort of like this section's going to eat. We're going to send out folks to go find more food. So it goes out and tries to find more food. At the same time, it's sharing nutrients with each other. It's pulling these different, the pigments out. And it's like pulling the pigments out through these vascular shuttle streaming systems. And as it's doing it, it's sort of depositing the pigments on the paper. Now that's all well and good. But there's another quality about slime mold, in that it's aware of its environment. It's not just some sort of, you know, senseless beast. It has like photoreceptors and olfactory chemical receptors and things like that. And its chemical sensitivities to different plant types is very, very fascinating. One of those chemicals is a type of compound found in valerian root. Valerian root, catnip, possibly ashwagandha, and what's that other one? Passion flower. They're used as relaxants. I don't know if any of you do herbalism stuff. They're used as things that sort of calm us down, sort of make us sleep, things like that. This group of chemicals also affects cats. So catnip is another one that has like this thing. It's cats who are catnip. They respond similarly to valerian root and passion flower. Slime mold also responds to the same very chemicals, which is fascinating that there's this transition from humans to cats, and it's acellular protoplasm. We all recognize this compound in this plant, which is so amazing. But it acts as a negative chemotactic agent, which is to say it is repulsed by the valerian root. Not that it's poisonous, it just doesn't like it. It has this personality thing where it doesn't like it.
It doesn't want to chill out.
It doesn't want to chill out. It's like, it's maybe even like a cat. It's like, hey, wow, ooh, I'm excited. I'm gonna go like explore stuff. But it's like, and it's interesting because every slime mold population is different throughout the world. They have these interesting characters. Most slime molds are attracted to valerian root to the point of fatality, where they'll hang out with valerian root and think, wow, this is so cool, I love this, this is great, and they die because they're not looking for food, because they just love the chemicals so much. It's a drug to them. But mine is a bit of a teetotaler, and then it's like, no, I want none of this at all, be gone. And it will avoid the valerian root. So in a way, it's sort of like figuring out how it's moving through a maze. And it's like, it's sort of moving through this ink blot. I love these ink blots, I love ink blots. Like, it's like a maze, like trying to sort of find its way out. And you can sort of see how sometimes they break the rules. Like, this is a good rule following one. And then you have this one, which is like sort of both. It's like, yeah, I'll play the game, but oh wow, cool. I'm gonna bust the wall here. And I try to get a good representation of like their behaviors. Like, they're really good guys, and like, you know, he's following the rules, kind of following the rules, that little crossover there. You know, they all are doing this like, it's really wild. It's like people. I mean, they're a population. Like, some of them are like, you know, renegades, and they'll bust through the wall. Some of them are like, we're gonna keep on going and following the rules. So that's slime mold, and it's very special to me. I love it, and it's my collaborator in these pieces. Thank you.
Can we ask a question?
Sure. Or yes, okay.
Yeah, get in here. Make this less formal.
So where the pigment ends, the red pigment, is that because the slime mold ran out of pigment, or did you?
It's like the ink ran dry.
That's where it just ends.
Yes.
Okay.
So yeah, this isn't like, I didn't like iron the slime mold to kill it. Like, well, these are all projections of those, of course. That's the actual documents. These are glue up and through.
This is like the PowerPoint presentation of
Yes.
those.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So those are the originals. So like, what I did was they would eat the oats with the red dioxide. They would do their thing, and eventually, like, they deposited their ink, and I would have a little, I call it, I heliback them out, is what I call it. I put a little piece of paper with oatmeal on it, and they're like, oh, oatmeal. And they go over the get on it, and then they like have left the red, and they're on the heliback, and I heliback them out. And then they've left their little ink trail, which is like their autobiography, you know? It's like an autobiography of their experience with my ink book. A diary, a chronicle. Because their form, their behavior is their history, and it's what is form, what is history, what is behavior, like, I don't know, it's just like the same way, like, you know, like I'm right-handed, I have more veins in my right arm. I have this is my right arm. I have more veins in my right arm than my left arm. And it's indicative of my history of being a right-handed person. So in a way, I think about that too. It's like, I'm really excited about it all. Anyway, that's, did I answer the question?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
then I'd also like to segue to Coleman's work. We haven't even touched on that yet at all. The quick and easy question is just like, let's talk a little bit about the way that communication comes into play.
Sure.
In your pieces.
Sure.
I'd love to even talk about some of the ones on the tables because they're pretty easy to see for the people who are sitting. Most of the specific ones you want to talk about.
Well, so I think the same basic principles apply across a lot of the work in this. I don't know if I would call this a series, a body of work, but sub-series perhaps. There are clearly pieces that are in groupings, and I'm sure what you notice is that I primarily work with text. I'm really, really interested in taking text and not denying the meaning of words, but flexing it, obscuring it. I'm particularly interested in how the meaning can be stashed within, but text can be distorted enough where it becomes image, which is what you see a lot here, whether it's written backwards or crossed over other text, so it starts to lose legibility. With some of these pieces, like this book here, you can see, and you can see that in pieces over here really well too. I'm interested in layering. With this one, there's the flexibility that each page on its own is still legible. You can completely read it, but as things turn, you get different kinds of layering, different kinds of overlapping. Things become less legible. So in this case, it's very clear how the meaning is retained. Everything in this book is some sort of commentary from other writers about the muse, a muse experience, information that feels channeled, different ways of knowing. And I think that when I work, I'm very much in those kinds of receptive states. Things are not always fully planned out. So I feel like there's flexibility of sense making in that as well. And then often I wait and see what I have after the impulse has struck me to put lines down in a certain way. The other thing that I'm really interested in with the crossing of text is this sort of forcing of different elements to exist together. And actually, we were talking about this the other night. I'm going to pull a quote out because I don't want to misquote. But we were having a debate over dinner. I used the word force, and everyone was like, no, not force. And then so I tried to articulate a little bit better for myself why I keep insisting on that word. I don't feel it has negative connotations. I mean, force, you can think of it in a lot of different ways. Force is in the force of divorce it somewhat from its expected meaning. That's not going to happen unless you really can break someone of their insistence upon sense, or sense in a traditional respect. But so here's what I came up with. As in the classical chimera, the creature, intersections in my text is fusing ideas together. This bridging or crossing of multiple ideas binds them into something new. I like to force associations so that boundaries are eradicated and expanded possibilities can be considered. I like to think of this in the surrealist sense, and this is a quote from Comte de Lautremont from Les Chants de Maldoror. This intersection is as beautiful as the chance meeting on a dissecting table of a sewing machine and an umbrella. So, while I'm not exactly a surrealist artist, in that I am not working with the fusing of disparate images, it's the same idea here, that like aligning things that don't seem to align creates an opening, a portal. I like to think of it as a spherical, in more of the Jungian description, that parts the veil, that gives us a glimpse into something on the other side. As a magician myself, I'm always working with this idea. How do we let whatever it is, you can call it the divine, you can call it something universal, something other. How do we access that? What happens if we are able to do that? How are we changed? And also as a magician who works a lot with text in spell work, that's the idea that you don't necessarily have to know what has happened. You don't necessarily have to know what the text says even. The ideas are still there. The magic has happened. The things have been crossed. The spell has taken place. And it is released into the ether. Yeah. That's a good place to stop.
I'll jump on that just really briefly because it segues so nicely into my work. So I have these slightly more medieval looking things that are around the room. It's a bestiary, it's a collection of creatures that are also letters, they're also an abecedarian alphabet. And they are toying with the idea of inviting an experience of letters, which are representations of sounds that we make to communicate to each other, as beings inherent. Like every letter and the sound that they represent would have its own life. What would it be like if all of our communication was that fragment of possibility for relationship, for kinship, for true ecology? So the beasties, they're sort of surrounding us and they're in this ecosystem of communication and magic and layered intention that my collaborators have made for them, living their own little lives. And through these larger parchment pieces on the far wall, and right here, we are basically casting a spell. We're inviting the beings, the hypothetical and real, ethereal beings of sound to inhabit flesh. Because each of these pieces is on deer skin and goat skin parchment, really traditional material that would have been used for medieval illumination. So it's very simply that. There's like nothing more to it. And they're really, really beautiful and complex and strange, and they're a little funny, and they have a little bit of a misfit attitude. So they're here keeping us company this evening and occupying all of our ears as we speak. And that's an invitation to think a little bit differently about what communication really is. That's all. We're here. We really want to talk to you. We want to hear what you think and what you're getting from this work. We're so grateful for your attention. And yeah, what questions are there? What can we talk about?
I would love, as somebody who's kind of, coming in blind, like I want you guys came together, like via Zoom, and how you got instigated?
It was really happenstance, but also it had to do with the pandemic. So Coleman and I both had an exhibition happening at the very beginning of 2020 that got interrupted in some way because of the aforementioned. And then we were bonding over that a little bit. We sort of met digitally and we were sort of, commiserating what a big bummer it was. And in that commiseration, a dialogue started, a friendship started, and when I had this exhibition slot on the calendar 2.5 years ago, I thought, wouldn't it be way more fun to have my new buddy come out and do a show? And then it was Coleman's idea to invite Thomas, and thank goodness. Because as I said in the very beginning, it was just an immediate trifecta superpower.
Yeah.
And so we invited him, and we were like, well, this is going to be crazy. So that was really it. I mean, we were all really far apart and a little depressed and bored. We needed something weird and crazy and hard and interesting to work on, and so then that's how it started.
And I think, of course.
You
And I feel like, I don't know, we're a lot more aware now of what our works were, but I feel like there was definitely golden threads within each other that we immediately were drawn to, Coleman, I loved the restraints of her compositions, which was so elegant to me. I was very drawn to that because I'm throw me along the big slime ball, it's nasty, the big stuff. And I really love cleanliness. And of course, I'm also an ink maker, and of course, I got into calligraphy, nobody's business. And I love manuscripts and all manuscript culture. I just love manuscript, and beautiful everything about it. So that was something that very much drew us together. But then there was all these other swirling things around it that were really more important than any of that. Our ideas about what the natural, supernatural is, why is there even boundary? Those things, and then what is communication? What is the ideal of communication? Is there an ideal of communication? Is there facts? Is there just poetry? All these things were so important to all of our ideas, but we were immediately drawn because we all had this sort of same idea of our appreciation of word, text, ink, and the material form ideas came in.
And magic.
And
alchemy.
Yeah.
Real alchemy, and then also metaphorical alchemy. That was just a common interest that we all had, which actually reminds us we have one more very important thing.
Oh yes, right.
So we're going to, we made a collaborative drawing. This whole exhibition is collaborative, but we also did a thing together. This is a drawing that we made, all three of us. So there's some of each of our work scanned, produced into a letterpress plate, and then I printed it in Vermont. It's printed on wildflower seed paper. This sort of stems out of our fine art practice and into our build a new utopia activist guerrilla gardening practice.
Align our feelings with great
Anarchy! And so this beautiful wildflower paper, this artwork is designed to be destroyed. They're all perforated, and if you do pick up one, you'll be invited to tear it in half. And break it up a little bit.
Or not if you have a larger plot.
You have a
of
large
land.
garden.
Tiny.
Place it in soil. They're very tiny. And offer libations. And bring some flowers into the world. The other half you keep as artwork because it's very tempting. And this features an alembic and an alchemical vessel. Our mascot of the show, which is the ash ligature, which is the AE together. and then some of Coleman's beautiful writing kind of containing it, the Hortus Conclusus, the enclosed garden. And then by doing this, you activate the spell. And it's very simple, and it's silly, and it's a very effective magic.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes. It also aligns with our one of our early ideas we were talking about, the interesting lunar qualities of it. Should I hear talk about that? Yes. So I don't know, this is an interesting poetic idea. So every full moon, the plants conspire together to paint it red. Now I say that and it sounds really wild poetry, witchcraft, but it's very much science. So what happens is, and what the alembic represents in this picture is actually the Earth and its magnetic field and the moon. What happens is the solar winds from the sun, where solar winds come from, blow extra oxygen off the tops of our atmosphere and off into like what's known as the magnetotail, which is sort of like a tadpole shaped thing that comes off the back of the planet. Blows it off, and then the moon orbits, and then when it gets within that magnetotail, the oxygen's hitting the moon, reacting with the iron compounds, like this, on the moon, and turning it red. Slowly rusting the moon. It's turning the moon this beautiful blushing color. And the moon is only in the magnetotail when it's full. So every full moon, this oxygen is turning it red. And of course, free oxygen can't exist on our planet without photosynthesis. So the respiration of plants. So literally, plants are conspiring by breathing together to paint the moon red every full moon. So this is magic, and it's fact, and it's poetry, it's science, and it's real, and we embodied it in there, and we're going to grow plants, and they're going to do the work. Yay!
And we've also created some sort of prayer flags, stringing together several of these with the idea that you can hang one in the garden and let it dissolve gradually on its own and drop the seeds, and then you will allow a spontaneous garden when exactly the time is right.
Yes.
Those are located in the esoteric commissary. But yeah, we looked at some more questions.
Yeah, Ben's got one.
So you did the alchemy and transmutation and stuff. Did you talk about some of the materials?
The gun thing.
The guns,
The
the
gun
bones
thing.
as well.
Yes, so I make ink, like I said, I make ink and pigments. And that's sort of like, my crafty part. I have two wings. I'm an artist, crafty guy. So I like to make ink and pigments, iron-based ones, iron oxides. There's the Marshall suites, Mars yellow, Mars black, Mars red. So I make pigments. Actually, I provided pigments to these my beautiful collaborators who use them to exquisite effect in the work. I make iron pigments out of firearms that I either are donated to me, or I purchase from pawn shops, or that I just find scrounging around in my shop, which is a junky place. Sometimes has gun parts in it. And I transmute them into pigments, inks, through, I would say it's through fairly simple chemistry, but very sophisticated mystic alchemy. Battery acid mostly. And from there you get these, the process goes as such. You take the gun, you put it in a pickle jar. Handguns fit pickle jars. If it's a shotgun, you gotta cut it up and then get it in a pickle jar. And then you add battery acid. The battery acid dissolves the iron, creating iron sulfate, known to the ancient alchemists as green vitriol, the power of sympathy, copperas, yada yada yada. And it's a very magical, ancient substance that has been used, still, classified by the World Health Organization as one of the most essential medicines in the world. Anyway, I digress. Iron sulfate is then the core prima materia from which pigments are made. And you can achieve pigments through various processes. Perhaps the most alchemical one is through calcination, the roasting of it. By roasting iron sulfate, you drive off the sulfurous compounds and you add the acids, and you get iron oxide, red iron oxide, which is this, which is also the same thing that the plants are turning the moon to. Red iron oxide, beautiful, beautiful thing. The saffron of Mars is what the alchemists would call it. You can also change it into black iron oxide, which is this magnetite. It's a magnetic thing. Oh, can you grab that magnet over there next to that I-beam? It's on stuff in the back of the iron. Magnetite, which is a fascinating pigment, in that it is actually magnetic. Let me go up. You gotta get kind of close to it. It's mild, it's magnetic.
There you go. Yeah.
So yeah, and this is the printer of money and checks, and it's also the early on magnetic tape that was recorded. It was like it occupies a very fascinating place between information technology, and that it was both pigment utilized for visual art and like painting and things like that, and at the same time it was being used for electronic information recording. So you have this place where it's pointing out in the different directions of our futures. Like now we have our computers and such. Anyway, lye and hydrogen peroxide. Just add lye and hydrogen peroxide, and then you get black iron oxide, magnetic. And then you get yellow, which is the same process. You just want lower temperatures and a higher pH. Lower pH and lower temperatures. It's an exothermic reaction. The flask gets rather cold, and it's nice. But yeah, and then your gun is like this beautiful somber rainbow of red and yellow and black. And that's how you make colors out of gun. I encourage you all to try it if you're not scared of sulfuric acid or lime.
You can also buy ink from
Oh, I sell it too. I sell it.
Can and should.
Jess?
Candace, with your pieces, especially like just the letter, does the shape of the surface, did that dictate what letter you put on it, or was there any just kind of random, was it more random?
These are cut into like pages for the most part, so that wasn't the shape of the surface, but I was really selective about the parchment pieces that I used, and I was responding to some of the texture. I didn't get pure, clean, super perfect vellum. I specifically chose deer hides that were full of tick marks and scratches and cuts and bullet holes, so that I could keep the life of that animal really precious and present when I was working the new beast into it. So yes, these beasts have been living in me for a long time, and they were ready to jump out into another corpus. So I don't think that I was like super selective, but once I did have that initial selection of the parchments, they just sort of chose their new homes pretty naturally. They're not like A for apple, S for snake. They're very explicitly not that. And it's actually really interesting because our brains really want to do that. Like, we forget because we're so visual and we're so oriented toward reading, but the language is in us, and it's sound. It's an oral experience, and it's a tongue and throat experience, and so we see that letter, and there's a lot of things that are happening because we have that sort of visual recognition of what it is. So, S really wants to be snake. It really wants to like jump there right away, and so to sort of pull back and say, well, no, like, what is your form telling me? Like, and some of the beasts are imagined. Some of them are chimeras, hybrid creatures. Some of them are parts of creatures, almost like a Frankenstein being put together, being born. And some of them are little kittens.
Did any others, like, any new sounds come out of you, like when you were making them?
Yeah, and activating sounds when you're writing them is a very runic practice, but yeah, there were a lot of vowel sounds. It's very guttural, and a lot of humming that was sort of happening as I was drawing them. So they definitely have a life, and they call forth the life within you when you're working on them, which is really fun. Yeah. We just have a couple more minutes, so we do have to wrap up at some point here. So.
I have a quick question. One, Candace, do you have synesthesia in two parts? Second part, did you all do a ritual in the last week, just the three of you, and Could you describe it to us?
I experience I call it synesthesia because I don't know what else to call it, but I have a visual recognition of sound. So I can see words spelled out, which makes me an excellent speller.
Yeah.
I didn't think that was weird, but apparently most people don't have that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it is.
It's
not
weird.
a thing people have. Yeah.
Our ritual was
Living together and making each other coffee in the morning and
tea
taking
in
care
the
of each
evening.
other.
It was mundane. It was mundane ritual, which is where magic is.
But it absolutely is in this entire show. All of my work, it's the ordinary that comes together to make something extraordinary. The chimera itself is that. It is a fantastical beast made from 3 ordinary,
Very
average
creatures.
animals. So,
Very average creatures, BAC.
And are we just did our ritual too?
yeah, that's true.
Yeah, we just did the
Because
ritual.
we just did ritual.
And then you had a question.
I have something like an observation. I'll talk louder.
It's loud in the hallway.
Sorry.
Yeah, so you guys are talking about your 4-hour Zoom calls and the collaboration came together. I won't say solely, the catalyst was the pandemic and your separation from other people, from everything else that you guys are on. And so I think it kind of, in a way, the barrier to communication opened up the communication between the 3. You made it more precious. And so you were maybe able to distill it down, like you said, mix it, force it together. And it's
Yeah.
it's very beautiful. Like how the communication becomes more precious the less you have.
I completely agree with that. And I think that the being here finally all together in one place was just it was such a confirming experience for me about how right we were to do everything as we did, to just sort of allow it to develop naturally, not to rush anything.
I freak out sometimes and say, no, I'm not going to do it at all. This is too much anxiety. But they try to come back into the fold, all part of the process.
But that feeling like we couldn't really have interaction beyond what was available to us, and it did make everything more precious. And, we felt like we knew each other through that anyway, because it was so intense. So it's just been really lovely to be all in person and to see how real it is.
And have that also as an element, considering that our whole theme is about these realms of communication. The fact that we were also using this hyper-mediated, looking at a screen, talking and while our ideas are about organic and the flow and these different things, I still feel that sort of static energy of Zoom. I hate to say it, I feel like Zoom's here with us. But I don't mean to say it like that. But you can't ignore the fact that was part of the components of the formation of the show. Because it's still, it's a effluvia, a minstrel of communication. It's still a way we talk. I mean, we have to, right? We weren't doing sitting down writing beautiful letters to each other.
We could next time.
Yes, maybe this summer when it happens. But yeah, I feel like that was part of it. It's part of it.
Yeah.
It's another one.
And we have a pretty much nonstop, including middle of the night, direct message thread that we still are in despite being in the same place.
Yes.
We're still using it. I mean, and sometimes it would be 2 of us with
Somebody's sleeping.
someone is sleeping and the rest of us, the others of us are just going on about God knows what, and then the other person pops back into this neck. Whatever.
I can't even respond to all this thing. But
It was beautiful.
it's beautiful.
It's beautiful. And we learned a lot about each other.
Yeah, we
and
did.
our work and our process.
And our own idiosyncrasies.
Yes.
Neuroses, fears, and those other things.
Yeah. I totally want everyone to have a chance to look at the work and ask us individual questions or purchase an alembic and plant your wildflower garden. So let's just call it and have a little bit of chat.
And we have some freebie seeds too.
Yeah.
So don't forget about
Everybody, there are letterpress printed chimera drawings that are collaborative. They're back on the back table. Those are free. Everyone should take one of those for